When we think of games that define a genre, a lot of great, amazing games come to mind. You might think of Mario, for instance, for his innovations in platforming, Dragon Quest for pioneering the JRPG, or maybe even Devil May Cry for its great style and action. But sometimes, there's games that maybe they don't go forgotten, but I think they aren't as appreciated as other games. You know, the action RPG genre has been around for over 30 years now, and there have been some amazing releases with real-time combat systems that make games so immersive now, and it's basically all modern games are. For me, when I think about games that pioneered this genre, I immediately think of Secret of Mana or the original Tales of Phantasia. There is another though, a Western developer, Blizzard, that I never really considered until now, and they made a game called Diablo, released back in 1996. Now, I think everyone and their mother knows about the Diablo series, but it was never a game that I personally got invested in. I had a few friends that played Diablo 3, but it never really caught my attention. That was until I watched this awesome video on why Diablo 1 is a masterpiece by one of my favorite YouTubers, the Axeman. He's a really great, passionate YouTuber that really draws you into anything he talks about. And at one point in the video, he said this.
However, if you can make it all the way to level 16 and kill Diablo by yourself, you should wear that accomplishment as a Medal of Honor and be damn proud of yourself.
So you know what, Mr. Axeman? I will claim that badge for myself. I've been inspired to make my own video as well. I want to see the beginnings of the action RPG genre in its PC form. I want to see it steeped in this dark fantasy setting where you descend into hell itself. Now, join me, fellow knights, as we play the original Diablo. The first thing that really captured me as soon as I chose my class is the first note of the village theme of Tristram. As soon as you're thrust into this place, you can feel that something's wrong. Like many others before you, you take your first steps around the village, meeting very few townsfolk thereabout. But it's not until you talk to the tavern owner that some of the plot is actually revealed.
Thank goodness you've returned. Much has changed since you lived here, my friend. All was peaceful until the Dark Riders came and destroyed our village. Many were cut down where they stood, and those who took up arms were slain or dragged away to become slaves, or worse. The church at the edge of town has been desecrated and is being used for dark rituals. The screams that echo in the night are inhuman, but some of our townsfolk may yet survive. Follow the path that lies between my tavern and the blacksmith's shop to find the church and save who you can. Perhaps I can tell you more if we speak again. Good luck.
Now, I know what some of you newer gamers might be thinking. Seriously, just some text crawls? But you gotta remember, this game came out way back. With the limitations they had, it's understandable that a lot of the games, if not 99% of RPGs back in the day, had a lot of text-based stuff that they talked about. But with Diablo, the way the voice acting is, the way it's written, it feels like an audiobook almost. It allows your mind to wander as you think of the horrors that dwell in the labyrinth. This is something Diablo is great at. It doesn't make you sit there for minutes and minutes reading and just watching standard images across the screen. It has quick snippets of dialogue, which add to the mystery of the world. As we continue down through the church, I want to mention how pleasing I think the game looks. I know it's old, but there's something about old PC games, especially in fantasy settings, that I just really like. When we arrive at the church though, we meet a man on death's door.
Please, listen to me. The Archbishop Lazarus. He led us down here to find the lost prince. The bastard led us into a trap. Now everyone is dead, killed by a demon he called the Butcher. Avenge us! Find this butcher and slay him, so that our souls may finally rest.
In this first few minutes, we've got the premise and basically what we're going to be doing in this whole game. Number 1, we're going to try and find King Leoric's son, who's missing in the labyrinth. Number 2, we know that Black Riders came and destroyed the town, so there's no going back. And number 3, Lazarus, this archbishop guy, betrayed the townsfolk by making them be slaughtered by a demon known as...
The sanctity of this place has been fouled.
Our first descent into the labyrinth is nothing really too scary. It's the first in 16 floors of ever-increasing danger. The enemies are nothing major, your standard enemies that you'd expect from any kind of fantasy setting in a crypt of some kind. You got skeletons, zombies, little goblin-type creatures, but what really captures me again is the ambient sounds, the unsettling music, which mixes in the sounds of people screaming and people crying. The only thing that breaks the silence apart from this is the sound of your footsteps or the clanging of steel of another enemy. If you allow yourself to get absorbed, it's super immersive. Before I know it, I've leveled up for the first time and I can assign myself some stat points. There's not much going on here that I can actually assign, so I'm just going to min-max myself as a warrior. I'm going to focus on strength and dexterity, and a little bit into life. I want to be able to tank everything by the end of the game. After exploring this first floor and just dabbling a bit in the second floor, I think it's time to go back up and chat to more of the townsfolk, so we can learn more about this butcher.
As it swathed a path through the bodies of my friends. He swung a cleaver as large as an axe, hewing limbs and cutting down brave men where they stood. I was separated from the fray by a host of small screeching demons, and somehow found the stairway leading out. I never saw that hideous beast again, but his blood-stained visage haunts me to this day.
These ominous text crawls really do set a horrific tone for what this butcher could be or look like. He's an otherworldly being, hacking away villages that you once knew, all because of this traitor Lazarus. Something I'm really glad they did was actually make you a returning member of Tristram in the story, because we, the player, don't actually know this town, and having the perspective of a returning member of the community is pretty interesting actually. We don't recognize the place or know what's going on, but you still feel an obligation to help these people who you once knew so well. You think as you're playing the game, what if I had arrived earlier? What if you'd stayed instead of leaving? What if he was there for everyone? But it's good to put actions into word instead, as we head deeper into the labyrinth to find the butcher. Now floor 2 is a bit of a step up from floor 1. There's a lot more going on in terms of enemy variety, and the walls are packed with creatures waiting to jump out and ambush you. You can very easily get overwhelmed in the early levels, especially when you're still coming to grips with the mechanics. While the combat would become quite fast-paced in later entries from what I've seen, the early Diablo games definitely remind me of a more active RuneScape. I'm so sorry if you feel insulted by that, but I actually love RuneScape and still play it to this day. I will reach level 99 fishing one of these days. What I'm trying to say is, when you find in this game, there's a lot of weight in what you do. You need to pick who you are hitting, how you're hitting them, and most importantly, what position you're hitting them in. Very early on, I began bottlenecking all of these enemies through doorways, killing them like they're waiting in line for their execution. But later the game opens up a bit more, and you get swarmed on all sides, and it gets really stressful and engaging, especially as a melee build. Luckily though, Diablo does give you an oh shit button if you put it on your hotbar, a scroll which teleports you back to town. But it does have a cast timer, so make sure you do it before the moment gets too tense. Man, I just want to say again, whenever I return to town, that first note hits my spine from top to bottom. It's not a comforting song or a nice atmosphere that you're back. It feels like you're on borrowed time. You have to gear up, heal up, grab your supplies, and learn all the information you can before you head back down into the labyrinth, before whatever's down there comes up. Heading back down into the dungeon, even though it's only floor 2, you never feel safe, and this feeling never goes away through the entire game. And this is something I really love about Diablo 1. Even though you're getting stronger, you feel more and more desperate almost as you go down. And I'm going to say this again and again as we continue to descend and meet more tough bosses and tougher enemies. Speaking of tough enemies, by the way, as we explore, we finally find where the butcher is. And when you fight him, you realize you are not going to be anywhere near as geared up as you thought.
Fresh meat. Fresh meat.
Finally putting a face to all of these stories you've heard as well, it really makes your mind race. Thinking about all those poor souls that were butchered without mercy just makes me want to freaking rise up and strike him down. But like me, you're probably not strong enough for this part yet, so you'll need to buff up your stats. Now, certain stats do certain things. In my experience through playing Diablo 1, I felt like dexterity was super important. Raising your dexterity makes it so that it's easier for you to hit monsters, and in turn, it's harder for them to hit you. So if you're having a tough time fighting a boss, or you keep missing an enemy, cramp up your dex as high as it can go, and hopefully you'll be fine. This is what helped me gain the edge, and helped me ultimately avenge the villagers by killing the butcher.
Fresh meat.
The spirits of the dead are now avenged.
Our first boss is now defeated, but it doesn't really feel like a victory, especially after going into his lair and finding the victims of his handiwork. I just keep thinking to myself, man, this is only floor 2, and I'm seeing this? How hectic are the next floors going to be? We're just getting started, and next up is actually one of my favorite bosses in gaming, on floor 3. That being... Earlier on, while I was preparing to fight the butcher in town, Ogden, the tavern owner, actually told me about the tragic tale of King Leoric. He's the king of this land, and his son is the one who's gone missing inside the labyrinth. He ended up going mad, and his soldiers actually had to put him down, and when this happened, he put a curse on everyone, and now he haunts the labyrinth. I think Cain, the elder, paints a better picture than I do, though.
The people always loved the king, and now they live in mortal fear of him. The question that I keep asking myself is how he could have fallen so far from the light, as Leoric had always been the holiest of men. Only the vilest powers of hell could so utterly destroy a man from within.
The king that everybody loved, cursed and burdened by the loss of his son. You feel like you almost owe it to him, the monster itself, to let him and his soldiers be free. His boss area is actually the next floor, and traveling there made me realize something about this game. Enemies do not respawn. Now, this can make you feel two ways. The first thing you'll probably feel is, hey, this is nice. I don't have to stress about getting ambushed in certain spots, and I can freely explore and slowly clear the labyrinth out. There is a finite amount of monsters, and you can win this if you persevere. You can clear them out and make the world safer, well, for now. But then the second realization hits. You need kills to level up. With a finite amount of monsters and quests, it means that the points you've been putting into your character now become incredibly important. There's no extra grinding to make levels easier. All you can do is clear each zone and hope, just hope that your points are enough to push you over the edge for the next floor. It makes exploring each area incredibly essential, not only to grind enemies, to find better loot, but to find more quests too and get good gear. Loot as well in Diablo is very, very important. You're going to want amazing weapons, armor, and accessories to push you over the edge. Because once you've maxed out a skill, that's it. No buffing it with potions, it's all in your gear now. Gear you'll need to take out bosses, like King Leoric. Let's enter his tomb now and hear his booming voice echo through it.
The warmth of life has entered my tomb. Prepare yourself, mortal, to serve my master for eternity.
Rest well, Leoric. I'll find your son.
Each boss, each encounter just feels so personal in this game. The small words exchanged just by you standing by yourself, and because there's not many of these dialogue parts in Diablo, they all really hit hard. It's very cheesy and very classic, but being a heroic knight, fighting literal evil and freeing people, I'm eating up every second of it. Now, there's lots of these little quests sprinkled out through the Diablo 1 experience. For example, you'll be heading back into town, and the innkeeper will tell you about his missing sign, which leads you to find it's been stolen by a demon, and he thinks that the sign gives him power. If you accidentally give him the sign, he tricks you and unleashes his horde on you.
Pinky magic!
Another quest, which I actually quite liked, was a tip I heard from Griswold, the blacksmith. He was describing a piece of rock that fell from the heavens, which was being escorted through town before the Black Riders had stolen it. Now, if we go into the depths and retrieve it, the blacksmith can craft us an item for our journey. Now don't worry, I'm well aware that this is literally just a fetch quest. Go find a random rock for a basic reward. But the way it's written and woven into the story is awesome. Finding a stolen rock somewhere in a huge labyrinth, who knows where that could be? What's guarding it? But that desperation clutches at you again, and you reach out for anything, like you're clutching at straws. Because of how hard the game is, you need any tiny bit of advantage in this place. And if you do find this piece of heaven rock, he forges you this ring that actually enhances your vision in the cave. The ring itself as well is a keepsake from his father, and he added the stone into it. Adding in these little details makes you feel like the ring is part of the village coming with you into the labyrinth. You don't feel so alone with, the Pippin's potions and the witch's scrolls. The weapons and items that Cain helps you identify too gives you an extra edge. You know what they say, it takes a village to raise a warrior. The best part in these big quest accessories as well is that these items can help you throughout your entire run, which makes completing these quests all the more rewarding and satisfying. It's a nice contrast to modern day side quests, which just feel like extra filler to pad up playtime, rather than expand the actual lore of the world. Every single quest in Diablo 1 has weight to it, even if it's something as basic as a room with a heap of enemies, like the Chamber of Bone. It's introduced to you by a book you find while exploring the labyrinth. This chamber seals anyone away who tries to claim its riches and forces them to be a guardian of the treasure. This is such a cool concept, and I almost did not want to go because I had no idea what to expect, but like I've stated a few times, the desperation you feel in Diablo makes you want to go to places I wouldn't even go with a gun. This place isn't even known to many of the villagers when you ask them. That's something you'll probably find yourself doing a lot, like I did by the way. When you go back into town, you'll heal up, repair your gear, and have a bit of a cheeky chinwag with all of the remaining members of the village. These characters are all pretty basic in their personality, but I'm literally following every single crumb of lore like I haven't eaten in days. It's always great to go back and hear everyone's perspective on something, as everyone has different personalities and they're pretty interesting to listen to, even if they're kind of basic.
Become an eternal servant of the Dark Lords should you perish within this cursed domain. Enter the Chamber of Bone at your own peril. A vast and mysterious treasure, you say? Maybe I could be interested in picking up a few things from you. Or better yet, don't you need some rare and expensive supplies to get you through this ordeal?
All of these quests, by the way, happen throughout the entire game. Whenever you've explored a new floor, it's always a good idea to go back to Tristram and ask around just in case there's something new for you to learn, like the Hellforge, which is an anvil you can find in the depths, and once you return it to old Griswold, he forges you Griswold's Edge, the sword I actually ended up using for my entire playthrough once I found a worthy enough shield to wield alongside his amazing blade. I just want to remind you as well that despite getting these new things like rings and armor and swords that push the enemies back, it still doesn't make the game super easy or make you overpowered. It just puts you over the edge to take out those few extra monsters before chugging more potions. My current tactic in Diablo 1 is swing a giant weapon and consume as many potions as you can until you either die from beast or indigestion. That's the beauty of Diablo though. You can play your class in any way because no equipment is actually locked behind anything. I went for a straight tank build, but you could be a magic archer or just go straight super powerful mage, whatever you fancy. Each one has a slight bonus to its preferred weapon though, but having the option is great, especially if you want to try a different approach as the floors descend. Now, I'm sure you've noticed in the footage, but as you get deeper and deeper, the floors go from catacombs, remnants of some kind of civilization, to burning embers. It's slowly, literally descending into hell. How you come out of a crevice that literally says, hell. As you descend as well, the enemies change up quite a bit. Yes, there are some reskins, but generally each floor has its own major issues to deal with. Once you hit the 9th floor, shit starts to get real, and you're hit with not just standard melee monsters, but slow and fast moving creatures, ranged attacks that make you feel like you're freaking Boromir, and you get buttloads of damage in open spaces, which, after having learned to bottleneck all your enemies, is quite the shake-up. I can see why people keep coming back over and over to replay Diablo games, especially because of the procedural generation of Diablo 1 as well. Even back in the 90s, these guys were doing procedurally generated dungeons, maximizing playthrough and replayability. The descent down solo is pretty brutal though. It's really fun to explore this place alone. In fact, I think being by yourself and not with friends kind of highlights the experience even more. Having all those odds stacked against you makes the victories so sweet. Even if it's just clearing a few enemies near the entrance, and all your potions get drained and you escape quickly through a portal and you jump back into the labyrinth afterwards. You've become a little stronger. You've cleared a couple enemies and made it a tiny bit easier for yourself. Not by much, mind you, because as you get further down, some creatures will start to cast lots of spells, and I mean lots of them, where you'll actually have to move out of the way to dodge. and this refreshes the gameplay and keeps it from getting so stale. So far, you've bottlenecked enemies, you've had to change your tactics, you've learned to hurt enemies around corners, dodge arrows, and you're combining all of these elements in the later floors. This game pulls no punches and really puts all of your reflexes to the test. I often found myself dipping my toes into the next floor and then going back up to clear more enemies to get that level up I needed to give myself a fighting chance. One of my favorite things again is that town portal, which saved my ass many times. The fact that enemies wait at the portal though, makes your mind wander, as you're gearing up. You're wondering, should you go straight through the portal and fight whatever's on the other side? Or should you head to a shortcut, climb down and surprise them instead? The enemies, by the way, at this point, are definitely not pulling any punches like the first couple of floors. The closer you get to Lazarus, the tougher the enemies are. I like how in contrast to the earlier levels, which had you basically fighting hordes and hordes of weaker enemies, it's now an elite force against you. There's these succubus that run into groups of enemies when you try to chase them, black knights with hulking armor that swarm you and swing you till you drop, stun locking you in place. There's a lot of great enemy variety on each floor. My only main complaint though is that after King Leoric, I didn't get much in terms of bosses or quests for quite a while, but that might just be I just got unlucky. There are some quests here and there that keep you busy, but especially when you descend into the lower halls, it starts getting less about what you're trying to do around it and more just about tunneling down and forcing your way through the hordes and hordes of demons. Not that I'm complaining. I know there were 3 other games that I can play to expand the lore, but I'll definitely say this game has got me hooked on trying the other Diablo games. It's really all the little things in Diablo that really add up to create its great experience. I know I've talked about music, exploration, and a bit of story dialogue, but even some of the sprite animations and artwork are really cool. I just love when my warrior's standing in Tristram, swaying and looking around. He seems paranoid, like something's watching him and he knows he isn't safe. The floors as well are super immersive and look great, and when creatures die they have some great animation, like the knights who burn and return to the inferno from whence they came. I do want to mention one extra enemy. Well, he appears to be an enemy, but he's actually a knight. The captain of the King's Knights, Lakdanan, who tasks us with getting a golden elixir to free him. Once again, a simple fetch quest that heightens the lore of the world. Everyone in town knows and respects him, and when you find the elixir for him, he actually bestows his helmet when you rescue him.
I will have little use for it. May it protect you against the dark powers below. Go with the light, my friend.
I want to say again, I love how each little quest builds your character up. You wield gear crafted by Griswold, with the helm of one of the greatest captains on your head. It's time to put all of this to use. Our skills obtained in the descent, our gear obtained through blood, sweat, and tears of not just us, but all of Tristram. It comes to a head when Cain the Elder reveals all, and sends us on our last 2 descents into the labyrinth.
Been Lazarus himself who kidnapped Albrecht and has since hidden him within the labyrinth. I do not understand why the Archbishop turned to the darkness, or what his interest is in the child, unless he means to sacrifice him to his dark masters. That must be what he has planned. The survivors of his rescue party say that Lazarus was last seen running into the deepest bowels of the labyrinth. You must hurry and save the prince from the sacrificial blade of this demented fiend.
Lazarus, the archbishop behind all of these killings, for the awakening of whatever dwells within, is finally within our grasp. But this is Diablo. You can be sure he's going to be pulling lots of nasty tricks once you walk through his portal. His room is full to the brim with these horrific mages who constantly teleport away and blast you, as well as these succubus variants that make you feel like you're being pelted with a machine gun.
Foolish quest. All that awaits you is the wrath of my master. You are too late to save the child. Now you will join him in hell.
There is something so satisfying about being a tank in this situation though. It feels like my character's taken on all the rage of Tristram, and I'm using it as a veil to push through all these infernal beings. And it's even more satisfying when Lazarus, the idiot, teleports himself into a corner and I just wail on him.
Your madness ends here, betrayer.
All that's left in this room after Lazarus' demise is a sacrificed child on a horrific altar. It seems we weren't fast enough, and whatever Lazarus has set out to do, he's unfortunately accomplished. So it's time to gear up. I present to you all my last descent into the labyrinth. It's time to face.
Oh, this, my friend,
The evil that you move against is the Dark Lord of Terror. He is known to mortal men as Diablo.
And that's it. A perfectly dark and twisted ending to a perfectly dark and twisted game. Diablo is now sealed inside the Warrior of Tristram, and he scrambles across the landscape to find someone, anyone that can help him as he keeps the beast contained. The ending to Diablo doesn't even feel like you've won. It feels like all you've done is delay the inevitable, but there's that small sparkle of hope as you watch the narrator image fade away and the game mercilessly boots you back to the title screen, expecting you to start another run. I hope that my own descent into the labyrinth has encouraged you to give it a shot. The simplistic storytelling, great atmosphere, and brutal combat just keeps you coming back for more and more. I really enjoyed this experience. It's not like any other game I've played. Anyways guys, I gotta head out for now. I hope you all enjoyed this descent. But before I go, I gotta remind you to keep shredding. See ya!
The Soul Stone burns with hellfire as an eerie red glow blurs your vision. Fresh blood flows into your eyes, and you begin to hear the tormented whispers of the damned. You have done what you knew must be done. The essence of Diablo is contained. For now. You pray that you have become strong enough to contain the demon and keep him at bay. Although you have been fortified by your quest, you can still feel him, clawing his way up from the dark recesses of your soul. Fighting to retain control, your thoughts turn toward the ancient mystic lands of the Far East. Perhaps there, beyond the desolate wastes of Aranok, you will find an answer. Or perhaps, salvation.